Wait a minute. Wait a minute. That sounds like a food coma applause. Is lunch that good? Okay, well, welcome back. We have a really exciting session for you, so I actually just going to jump to it. Allow me to introduce, this session's called Are Ads Obsolete and Is Banner Blindness Contagious? So here to lead this discussion is Shiv Singh of PepsiCo, Rashad Tabakawala, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer from Vivaki, and Daniel Stein, CEO of EVP. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Come on up, guys. Thank you. All right, rock it.
No, thank you. I drink Aquafina.
So Shiv, are ads obsolete?
So it's interesting. So I think first and foremost, I feel engagement experiences matter. They can be paid for by brands. They can be created by consumers. They can be created by media companies. That's what matters. The traditional construct of ads in my mind are starting to die a bit. But experiences driven from brands are in vogue once more. No.
You know, I would basically say that advertising will continue to matter and grow. And just like 10 years ago, Wired had a cover, Are Ads Dead, with the Pillsbury Doughboy blindfolded. Since that, the advertising market has doubled. And the reality of it is that people love advertising. And we don't accept that they love advertising, those who are in the business, but people love advertising and advertising works. But clearly, it has to be much more engaging. But oddly, a 30-second commercial often is far more engaging than a lot of elaborate things we do.
You know, it feels like the way we see the world, it's almost as if ads fill a different role in the ecosystem than they used to. You know, you used to be able to build a brand with print and TV, but those were the tools you had. You know, now that you have tools that allow people to engage and become part of a bigger community, I feel like we've pushed advertising, paid advertising, into a place of driving participation and driving people into a bigger world, into something that is more meaningful.
But, you know, like for me, there are like sort of a few sort of competing tension points. So one is we're used to thinking, or we sometimes play up the cliches that ads are interruptive forces between the content that we actually want to see. So that's sort of one. Second is when it comes to online, we work with the cliche that online you can't get the awareness and reach of TV, but it's more engaging or it's more interactive. I think there's sort of some more fundamental shifts happening. One is, consumers aren't differentiating as strongly between what ads and what TV is, and that those lines are blurring more and more every day. And the best example for me is, or the point was really driven home, was in the last Super Bowl for our brand Brisk. We ran Super Bowl advertising, as we were doing with Pepsi and a few of our other brands. The Brisk ad did horrible in the USA Today ad meter. Of the 50 ads, it came in 49th or 48th. But what was interesting about it is it did exceptionally well with all the online meters, with all the, whether it was the YouTube meter or the Facebook meter or something that Nielsen did. Anyone who saw the ad online loved it. Because when they saw it online, they saw it as a piece of content, and it had M&M in it, and there were all these Easter eggs, and it had a narrative and a point of view. And I think that's why, and that's where things are getting really interesting, because it was an ad, and yet it wasn't an ad. And that's sort of where I feel it works.
I would sort of build on that, which is most, instead of thinking of the words advertising, we're increasingly using the word commercially underwritten brand content.
Yeah.
And really, if you think about commercially underwritten brand content, it could basically be in any form. It could be on any space. So, simple as Facebook has at least 3 areas of commercially underwritten brand content. It has its paid forms. It clearly, in your own page that you manage, it's your own form. And then what people basically say, spread about you is a earned form. And historically, paid, owned, and earned tended to be much more paid, less owned, and the owned wasn't electronic. It tended to be more like assets like bottles and stores and things like that. And earned was always powerful, but it never scaled. Today, because of what we call the people's network, which is the way we sort of look at social rather than Facebook or any particular platform, it's the people's network. It allows things to scale, which allows earned to be a little bit more important. And it allows owned to be more important as the internet allows marketers to distribute content directly without going through a middle person. So now you really have paid, owned, and earned, where paid will still be a majority, but we can see a rise of owned and earned. And the magic will be how do you connect those 3 rather than how one is more dominant than the other.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I also think it's interesting that the best currency out there for spreading and for getting a message to work its way out through social or paid media is still video, which is interesting because there's been so much talk about utility and application and mobile and everything in years past, but it always feels like the pieces of content that spread the fastest and the farthest are still video. They're just the content is just created a little bit differently. And when you look at, when you have the luxury of buying space in front of a captive audience, you create the stories a lot differently than when you're creating them with the intention of them spreading and being shared. I mean, we think all the time when we're creating a campaign, it's what's going to get somebody to want to share this. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the content. It has more to do with the person. And we feel like when you're creating content with the intention of people sharing it, you have to think when people share, they're doing it because they're building their brand as much as helping you build your brand. And they never say, wow, this is a great piece of content for Nike. I'm going to post it on my page, and that'll really help Nike out. It's like, it's going to make me look cool if I post this up on my Facebook page or I tweet about it. So I'm just building on what you guys are saying, thinking of it as content and thinking of it as building sort of these living stories inside of social media is what gets people involved and gets people to want to spread the word for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one interesting question which there's a lot of debate on, and I don't really understand it well, is the whole question of banner blindness. So we know, of the approximately something like 40% of all dollars spent in digital go to display advertising, to the various forms of banners, reach, frequency, all that fun stuff. And the question is, does that deliver value the way it used to in this age where we're talking about content sharing and the lines between advertising and content blurring and the blurring of paid, owned, and earned? I don't know, what do you guys think?
I believe that just normal banner stuff has actually become, to a great extent, taken over by direct marketers. So the economics of banners, the reason it's coming down so significantly say, video or sponsorship, is primarily because it's actually being evaluated on a cost per click, cost per sale, cost per acquisition basis. And the price is low and will continue to be low, but there continues to be significant sort of display dollars. What's happening with the display dollars is they're sort of moving from what used to be the big content companies online of Yahoo and AOL into either Facebook or the Google Display Network. And it's pretty spread. But I think to your point, what seems to matter a lot is, can you actually get some sort of interaction which is relevant? And in effect, the more you can deliver sort of relevance, the better it works. So clearly, search has always been relevant, and we do know that sponsored stories are relevant, much more than anything else. But eventually, we will figure out, as these dollars grow bigger, how the economics work. Because at the back of it, and Shiv, you're the client out here, so you can talk a little bit about the economics. Eventually, after all the hysteria about how great social is, we have to eventually figure out 2 very simple economical things, which is A, what's the economics on versus other ability? And then how much scalability and control do you have? Because while it's all very well to say, give up control, the problem simply is if you stop selling Aquafina and Pepsi and you give up control, you won't have a job. And sometimes people get so worked up about all this new world, they don't seem to understand the back end of the economics. How much can this work and how much can't it work? And to a great extent, a lot of a simple economic thing is if you think about, like I was just in India, and there's a city called Bangalore, and in the night at 10:30, you have these trucks going back and forth, sending people to all the telemarketers. They've got 50,000, 100,000 people working at telemarketers. Why? Because all the marketers of America are trying to reduce the cost of actually answering you. Then you basically tell the same marketer, when somebody basically puts your stuff on Facebook, you sort of treat them like a roly-poly duck, that they're very special. How does that work? How does the economics work? When in one case, you're trying as hard as possible to reduce the cost of customer support, and then we talk about how we have to handle everybody with kid gloves. And those are the things that I think, for this industry to become real, and I'm a huge believer in it, we have to go from singing Pollyannish songs to how does the economic models work for marketers, not how the economic model works for Facebook.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, because I can tell you from the standpoint of having to worry about, marketing mass-scale brands digitally. Social media, no question, is a mass-scale phenomena, but social media marketing isn't, without a doubt. So even when we look at paid, owned, and earned, or paid, owned, and social together, there's a massive imbalance between the three of them. The other thing that's interesting, though, when it comes to display advertising is there's a positive intersection. So one is absolutely the direct response world. The others, when you make social and display work really well together. So to give you an example, recently at the Emmys, so for Diet Pepsi, we work a lot with Sophia from, of Modern Family fame. And she was tweeting live from the Emmys. She's a brand ambassador for Diet Pepsi. We love her. She's absolutely amazing. And she was sharing some really interesting, neat tweets, about the Emmys and her point of view, which aligns with the Diet Pepsi point of view, all that stuff. Those tweets were being fed live into display ads that were then being pushed, on a mass scale to all the mass, but still targeted to all the Diet Pepsi consumers out there on the internet. And that made a lot of sense. It was highly targeted, highly relevant. It was real time. It had pop culture resonance with it. And in that case, it worked. But otherwise, it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, no, I think it's, the way we try to look at the world is sort of figuring out social first. Figuring out what the consumer participation angle to a campaign is going to be, and then how the rest of the media fits into that ecosystem. And when we choose celebrities for campaigns that we're doing, it's usually celebrities that have the largest social followings, because they're the ones who are going to be able to drive participation and drive traffic. And when we think of how we're going to use online advertising or display advertising, even traditional display advertising, it's like, how is this going to be a gateway to a deeper social experience? It's I think where you see banner blindness and ads becoming wallpaper is when it's just a message that begins and ends there, and it doesn't actually bring you to something else. It doesn't take you into a deeper experience. And I've never, sometimes you'll see, and I think the engagement experience, the social experience has to be great. It has to be high quality. You can't make a bad experience great by buying a lot of banners around it. And I think that's one of the mistakes a lot of agencies, a lot of marketers make is, we'll create something over here and then we'll spend a ton of money driving traffic to it, and that'll make it viral, that'll make it successful.
Yeah. No, that's really key. I mean, certainly I'd say the banners can be a means, but they can't be an end unto itself. And the end can't be a microsite. I mean, I think we've all lived through the pain and the mistakes of those. But what can happen, and I think what we're seeing happen a lot more online, is brands are discovering that for them to resonate with their consumers and have meaning in pop culture, if they're a pop culture brand, They can't be all about just either pushing a message or about trying to bring consumers into sort of a temple of the brand. You know, we love creating these wonderful temple-type experiences. And something, so in contrast to that, something that we're doing for brand Pepsi, and this is because we have this big sponsorship with the X Factor, you know, which is the American Idol competitor that's on air now, is we've launched, and it's officially launching tomorrow morning, is this really immersive social TV co-viewing application called Pepsi Sound Off, where you go in it when you're watching the TV show, and you want to get points in it, you want to play the game, and it really, truly, and I know I'm biased, but it does add value to the consumer viewing experience.
Does this work with Twitter or with Facebook?
Yeah, it totally pulls in from Twitter, and you can export out to Facebook as well, but it has its point system, it's caps. We don't do badges, we do caps in my world. But it's highly engaging, and in fact, the top commenters and the people who rank the highest on the leaderboard, they'll actually be put on our TV spots around the X Factor. So there's a huge reward system. It works. We're confident it's going to work, rather, because the experience is highly consumer relevant, centered on what consumers want to do with each other in a way that complements the social networks. And then we use the display advertising to build awareness for it, versus to use display advertising to build awareness for a temple microsite type experience. Yeah.
I would state that the best way for the owned or the earned/shared part of media or connections to grow relative to paid and owned is for all of us to actually sort of make fact-based determinations, of which we very much, and we are investing a lot of money in this space, we basically begin with 4 or 5 key things that we believe. Now we'll have to see whether they're absolutely true or not. So the first is most people don't want to have relationships with brands because they have a very hard time having relationships with people anyway. Okay? So, you know, somebody said to me, they said, like, I don't want to have a relationship with Tylenol, I want my headache to go away. Right? And so one of the key things is we all talk about relationships, and the whole idea is, come on, I can barely have time with my kids. Who wants a relationship with someone whose idea of a relationship is, I'll be friendly with you so you can buy me? Okay? So, I mean, if you're talking about authenticity and transparency, then we have to start off with that as one particular key point. The second is a lot of the statistics that we hear, which you've rightfully said, at a level sounds very mass, but then when you start breaking it down, it tends to be very unmass. So for instance, all these people who like you on Facebook, less than 1% to 2% in the next 30 days will ever go to your page, if that. Okay? So liking means nothing. So it means nothing. So what tends to basically happen is we're trying to sell people a currency which is useless, which is a very strange way of building an industry.
And you know, I think along those lines, if I can add, it's a positive step from Facebook that now they complement liking with who's talking about you. They've realized that too, that they've gotten a bit too carried away and crazy.
Exactly. And then to a great extent, the statistics are the following. You know, 2% of Twitter people make up about 90% of all the noise. Right? And most of that 2% is in this room. So that happens to be one. The second is the half-life of a tweet is less than 8 minutes. So in effect, if you want to be tweeted, you have to like harass people and constantly tweet and tweet again. Right? So these are fundamental human things and underlying economics that I think this industry really, all of us have to address for real advertising and marketing dollars to come in. Because at the end of it, there isn't a huge amount of it. Because if you suppress Facebook, right? There isn't a huge amount of it right now. Yeah. And that's the key thing. It's less about banners and ads. It's how does this actually help marketers, but more importantly, how does it answer a consumer or person need that then marketers can underwrite?
Yeah, there are a lot of fake metrics.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Should we see if anyone has questions?
I think we may be out of time.
You have a minute.
Rishad, yes.
Rishad, you mentioned your beliefs, you mentioned 2 of them. Were there others
Yeah, I mean, a third, you know, to a great extent belief is social/earned media will actually be a lot to do with mobile phones than anything else. And so in many ways, social and mobile, I know people talk about local, but social and mobile somewhat get very integrated when you think about how much of people's time is spent. And one of the things we're discovering with mobility is it's completely destroying this whole weird separation between analog and digital. So our third belief is all things analog are becoming digital, all things digital are becoming mobile, and all things mobile are becoming analog. Because it gets down to people and place. And so one of the key things when people tell me about analog and digital and how cool digital is, I said, I was doing digital 10 years ago. It's no longer cool. It's and that's a sort of a third belief, which is this whole how analog, mobile, and all of those work together.
Yes.
Yeah, Chief, I have a deep question. I get asked this all the time, which is why I'm going to ask you.
Thank you.
As companies go more direct, like building your co-viewing app, instead of actually working with GitGlue or any of the other people that have co-viewing apps out there, you're disintermediating the media companies. So to what extent is that true, as we're saying, you're not spending advertising dollars anymore because you're actually building the apps, and you're even cutting out the app platforms as potential media buyers?
So I think that's absolutely happening, and you're right. An example of that. It's interesting as an industry. We sort of take a binary approach to things. We're just disintermediating the media companies today. Tomorrow we're spending with them, but it's really a lot more complex than that. So when we market and when we advertise, we look for two things. One is fundamentally, what are the best ways that we can engage consumers that can build up brands and support their lives, add meaning to their lives? Absolutely important. Then we get down to the tactics of how we do it. In some cases, it can be advertising. In other cases, it can be we can wake up one morning and say, hey, wait a minute. There's a fault line in this whole massive media, tech, type ecosystem where we can actually create something that becomes a leverageable asset for us, like our Pepsi Sound Off app. We're using it for the X factor, but guess what? We're going to be using it all year next year, and we're not going to be paying anyone licensing fees because it's ours. We own it. So when we find those opportunities, and the economics make sense, we make those investments. So it's a strategic choice. Yeah.
I think they're telling us to stop.
Oh.
Thank you.
A trend along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, if your company is building applications in-house, like just
Yeah.
last week, the TV Guide decides to bring in their mobile development team, 45 people in-house.
Yeah.
What do you see for the future of big brand relationships with big agencies?
Yeah. So I see two things. Sort of the war on talent is going to get even more crazier because brands are going to have to do more themselves, even if it's just simply to operate in real time. So I think that's one piece. And the agencies will want to adapt and partner as well because they want to be a part of that. The second thing is there'll always be these wonderful, glorious phases and then these humbling phases. Fundamentally, I'm in the beverage business. I mean, it's a little arrogant of me to say that I can build a lot of amazing apps and a lot of media ecosystems that can match what a Condé Nast could do. So it's complex. We'll do some things well, we'll fail in some others. And so it's hard to know how it all will turn out. But we do see fault lines and opportunities to innovate. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.